relationship to tinnitus, and the different ways that we can prevent noise-induced hearing loss, okay? And we'll be discussing how loud is too loud.
Excuse me, my screen is covered with the noise-inducing hearing loss. How loud is too loud? Can that be taken down?
No, so that is the presentation.
Yeah, but can you take down the notice so we can see you?
Oh, no, that's not a notice. That's a presentation. So you're gonna only see that presentation and not the speaker.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You. No worries. And the other reminder is try, if you can mute your microphone so we don't hear a lot of background noise, and we'll have the time at the end to answer all your questions. And also this seminar will be recorded, okay? We won't include your name in the recording, but if you want to go back to look at the recording later, it will be on our website. Thank you.
So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat box below. So if you're using a computer, you will see the chat box right here on Zoom. And if you're using a mobile device, if you click the three dots, you will see an option to access the chat box. And we'll get back to you with the answers during our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Again, I'm located in the San Francisco campus, and here are the rest of the faculty and staff, some of which you might have had the pleasure of seeing at our clinic. So here's the rest of our faculty and staff members in the San Francisco campus. We also have presence in the Stockton campus, where Dr. Gale is the audiology clinic director, and there's also a few clinical faculty and staff members there as well. So before we get started with the presentation, I just want to make note that this month of May is Better Hearing and Speech Month, so it's perfect timing to have this webinar. This month is dedicated to raising awareness for communication disorders involving hearing, speech, and language. It's also a great time to get your hearing tested, introduce treatment options for those who already have hearing loss, and also to inform you about the things you can do to protect your hearing. So here's today's agenda. I will first give an overview of sound and how we hear. Then I will talk about noise-induced hearing loss, what causes it, and the factors that affect individual susceptibility. Effects of noise exposure, including hearing loss and tinnitus, and the different ways we can prevent noise-induced hearing loss. So hearing protection devices, such as earmuffs and different types of earplugs. I will end the presentation by discussing two commonly frequently asked questions related to noise exposure. So noise exposure during concerts and when using headphones and earplugs for music. So that's just an outline of what I'll be talking about in this presentation. So I'll get started with what is sound. So sound we know is made up of vibrating air molecules that we can hear. These sound waves are formed by objects vibrating, so shaking back and forth. Sound waves travel through air, water, and solid objects as vibrations. And we measure sound intensity, so how loud a sound is, in units, what we call decibels. So it's a measure of pressure or forcefulness of sound, so how loud the sound is. So let's take a look at how we hear. Okay, so first, sound is present and the waves enter the outer ear and travels through the ear canal that leads to our eardrum. So here we have our ear canal and sound is traveling through the ear canal to our eardrum. The eardrum vibrates and sends the vibrations to the three small bones in the middle ear, which are known as the ossicles. So here are the ossicles of the middle ear. The middle ear ossicles amplify the sound vibrations and then sends them to our organ of hearing, known as the cochlea. So here is the cochlea. When sound goes into the cochlea, hair cells send a wave of energy to the auditory nerve, and then the responses are carried to the brain for our interpretation. Okay, so that's just an overview of how the auditory system works and how we perceive sound. So what is noise-induced hearing loss? So in abbreviation, noise-induced hearing loss, we abbreviate it as NIHL. As indicated in the terminology, it's when an individual loses their hearing due to loud noises. So every day we experience sounds in our environment, such as the sounds from our television, radio, household appliances, traffic, and so on. Normally, these sounds are at a safe level that don't damage our hearing. However, sounds can be harmful when they are too loud, even for a very short, brief period of time, or even when they're both loud and long-lasting. So these sounds can damage the sensitive structures in the inner ear, called hair cells, and cause noise-induced hearing loss. Noise-induced hearing loss can be immediate, or it can take a long time to be noticeable. It can both be permanent or temporary, and it can affect both one ear or both ears. Even if you can't tell that you're damaging your hearing at the moment, you could be having trouble hearing in the future, such as not being able to hear other people when they talk, or having difficulty hearing in background noise. Regardless of how it might affect you, the one thing is certain is that noise-induced hearing loss is the one type of hearing loss that you can prevent. And again, I will talk about how we can do this later on in the presentation. In the last slide I mentioned, I mentioned that loud sounds can damage the sensitive structures in our ear and cause hearing loss. One of the major structures responsible for hearing is our hair cells. So hair cells are the sensory cells in the auditory system, and they help to transform sound into electrical signal. Most cases of noise-induced hearing loss is caused by damage and eventual death of the hair cells. So in the picture to the left here, we see a scanning electron microscopy image of very nice, sturdy rows of hair cells in a healthy cochlea. And next to it, we see a damaged cochlea with hair cells that have fallen over, bent, or they're even missing. The same thing in the picture to the right. So this is a picture of the nuclei of the hair cells. So this is taken using confocal microscopy. So in the healthy cochlea, we see three very neat rows of outer hair cells. So these are outer hair cells right here, and this is a row of inner hair cells. After noise exposure, we see that the hair cells die and are missing, as indicated by these arrows right here. So these show that hair cells are missing, and we also see very small condensed nuclei, so meaning that these cells are in the process of dying. So they're in the process of apoptosis. So unlike birds and certain amphibian hair cells, the hair cells in humans do not regenerate. So once they die, they're gone permanently. So who is affected by noise-induced hearing loss? People of all ages can be affected by noise exposure, including children, teens, young adults, and older people. So they can all develop noise-induced hearing loss. At least 10 million adults, so about 6% in the United States, under 70 years old, have features in their hearing tests that are indicative of hearing loss in one or both ears from exposure to loud sounds. Okay, so while adults are at highest risk of noise-induced hearing loss, the rapid increase in headphone and earbud use in kids, among kids and teens, means that they're at risk too. So researchers have also estimated that as many as 17% of teens, ages 12 to 19, have features in their hearing test indicative of noise-induced hearing loss in one or both ears. Again, what causes noise-induced hearing loss? We know that noise-induced hearing loss is caused by exposure to loud sounds. Okay, so this can be caused by being around loud noises for over a long period of time, such as machine noise at work, or exposure to a single loud noise in a very short period of time, so such as gunshots or explosions. Noise-induced hearing loss can be caused by both recreational and occupational noise, such as working with machinery or at a loud factory. And the recreational noise exposure can be due to loud hobbies. So these loud hobbies include things like hunting, shooting, listening to loud music, attending concerts, playing in a band, lawn mowing, woodwork, and so on. So these loud sounds overstimulate the very delicate hair cells, and this leads to the permanent injury or the death of these hair cells. Although everyone is at risk for noise-induced hearing loss, some individuals may be at higher risk due to their genetic background. Okay, so noise-induced hearing loss is a very complicated disease that results from the interaction of genetics as well as the environmental factors. Some people inherit genes that make them more likely to develop noise-induced hearing loss, and scientists are working to figure out which genes increase the risk. Today, the development of what we call the high throughput genotyping methods allow detection of hundreds and thousands of single nucleotide polymorphisms or genetic variations in a single array that will help identification of new genes that allow individuals to be more susceptible to noise. This in turn will contribute to development of genetic testing that will allow for better protection of noise exposed individuals as well as personalized treatment. There are many biological factors as well that influence a person's susceptibility to noise-induced hearing loss. This includes sex. So males are at higher risk as compared to females. Also age. So older folks are more susceptible as compared to younger individuals. A person's genetics. So certain genes can exacerbate hearing loss or have hearing loss as part of the genetic mutation. A person's general health is also very important to consider because there are diseases that can have auditory involvement. And lastly, exposure to ototoxic agents. So ototoxic agents can include medication as well as workplace chemicals. So ototoxic chemicals can affect hearing. Some of them can cause hearing loss even without simultaneous excessive noise exposure, and others interact with noise to create this synergistic effect that increases a person's risk for noise-induced hearing loss. Medications such as chemotherapy drugs, cisplatin, carboplatin, in combination with noise exposure can exacerbate the hearing loss. And ototoxic chemicals in the workplace can pose a risk to hearing. And some examples of these chemicals include heavy metals like lead and mercury, and certain solvents such as styrene and carbon disulfide and many others. So now that we know that loud noises cause hearing loss, let's take a look at the common noise levels. Again, sound intensity is measured in units called decibels. So the higher the decibel value, the louder the sound is. So as we can see here in this picture, a typical conversation is about 60 decibels. A subway platform or a very busy city is about 90 to 95 decibels, and a jet engine taking off can be extremely loud, so about 140 decibels. So, you know, just to see the relative decibel level, something like a whisper would only be around 30 decibels. So how loud is too loud in this case? So this leads us to our next slide, looking at the extent of damage to your hearing caused by noise exposure depends on three major factors, okay? So we have the decibel level, how loud is the sound? The distance, how close are you to the source of the sound? And lastly, we have the time, the length of time that you're exposed to this loud sound. So how long are you exposed to this loud sound? So the louder the sound, the more damage it can cause to your hearing, and the quicker this damage will occur, okay? Sounds at around 70 dBA are considered generally safe, and any sound above 85 dBA are more likely to damage your hearing over time. Researchers have found that people who are exposed to long periods of noise at 85 dBA or higher are at much higher risk for hearing loss. So that's why workers are required to wear hearing protectors when in an occupational setting, such as earplugs or earmuffs on the job. In terms of distance, a sound gets louder as you move closer to the source and softer as you move away from it. So if you're far away from the sound, the risk of damage to your hearing is much lower. So at concerts, for instance, sitting away from the speakers will reduce your risk. And lastly, in terms of time, so the impact of noise, interestingly, adds up over a lifetime. So if you're exposed to loud sounds on a regular basis, for example, at a workplace, your risk for permanent damage increases over time. So even a single but long-lasting event can cause substantial damage to your hearing. So how loud is too loud? We have two government entities, so OSHA and NIOSH, that set legal limits on noise exposure in the workplace. So OSHA stands for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and NIOSH stands for National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. So these limits are based on a worker's time-weighted average over an 8-hour day. Okay, so with noise, the OSHA's permissible exposure limit is 90 dB for all workers for an 8-hour day, which means that exposures at or above this level are considered hazardous. So the difference between NIOSH and OSHA is the exchange rate. So OSHA, we see here, uses 5 dB increments, so 85, 90, 95, 100, and so on, while NIOSH uses 3 dB increments. So they go from 82, 85, 88, 91, and so on. So according to each governing body, a person can safely be exposed to each intensity level for its corresponding time without the risk of noise-induced hearing loss. So for example, let's look at this OSHA table. So according to the OSHA standard, a person can withstand an environment of sound levels at 95 dB for 4 hours. Okay, so after 4 hours at 95 dB, they become at risk for noise-induced hearing loss. Next, let's take a look at the effects and the signs of noise-induced hearing loss. So depending on the cause of your noise-induced hearing loss, whether it's gradual, so you've been working at a factory or with machinery for 20, 30 years, or if this was a sudden onset, so maybe you were near an explosion or you attended a very loud concert. So depending on the cause, the symptoms may be immediate, or this might develop over time. Some of the most common symptoms of noise-induced hearing loss include decreased hearing, inability to hear high-pitched sounds, muffled or distorted speech. You might also have what we call noise-induced tinnitus. So that's ringing or buzzing in the ear or around the head. You might also experience oral fullness, so the feeling of pressure in the ears, and also otalgia, so ear pain. Noise-induced hearing loss symptoms might last minutes, hours, or days after the noise exposure is over. So in terms of the hearing loss caused by noise can be just temporary. For some people, hearing returns to its normal limits after 16 to 48 hours after exposure to loud sounds. Recent research suggests, however, there may be still long-term permanent damage, even though it's not noticeable or detectable immediately. So even if your hearing returns to normal, the cells in the inner ear may still be destroyed. So if enough healthy cells are left, your hearing will eventually come back. But as more cells are destroyed over time, hearing loss can become permanent. Again, loud noise exposure can cause tinnitus, which we experience or describe as ringing, buzzing, or roaring in the ears or the head. And that is one of the initial signs of damage after noise exposure, which is the presence of tinnitus. Tinnitus may subside over time, but this can sometimes continue constantly or occasionally throughout a person's life. Continuous exposure to loud noise can aggravate tinnitus, and patients may perceive an increase in loudness or even a change in pitch of their tinnitus. Most people who have a long history of noise exposure complain of tinnitus that's tonal in quality and that is high-pitched. So in general, the presence of tinnitus after noise exposure, regardless of whether you feel like your hearing has changed or not, means that the noise exposure has altered your auditory system. In our last hearing healthcare webinar, I was mainly focused on tinnitus, and this slide I'll just review again on how to relieve some of this noise-induced tinnitus. So if tinnitus is bothersome enough, or if it begins to impact the person's quality of life, the person will usually seek medical attention from an audiologist. So currently, there are many therapies used to alleviate the tinnitus, including hearing aids, sound therapy, different types of counseling or behavioral management techniques, stress reduction, stress management, and there are many others. So if you're unsure of where to start, the first step might be to get your hearing tested. So if your audiologist determines that you have hearing loss and that you're a candidate for hearing aids, having a trial period with hearing aids is often recommended. Not only will the hearing aids help you hear better, but it can also offer some relief from your tinnitus. So there are some applications or programs in the hearing aid that can introduce some background noise or some Zen tones that can help you suppress or reduce the perception of tinnitus. In other cases, things like mindfulness can also help. So mindfulness is being aware of the sensations and allowing the present moment to unfold without judgment, involving elements of stress management techniques such as yoga, breathing exercises, and meditation. And we also have a very common or very popular therapies, tinnitus retraining therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, which help to address the individual's reaction to tinnitus by challenging the negative reactions and restructuring the patient's thoughts. So these techniques or therapies are all available at an audiology clinic. Moving away from the tinnitus and going back to the hearing, so after noise exposure, a person's hearing can decrease, and this is called a shift in the person's hearing threshold. Okay, so the hearing threshold is the softest sound a person can hear. After noise exposure, the ear's sensitivity will decrease and there will be a shift in hearing. And this shift may be permanent or temporary. So we've probably all experienced a temporary threshold shift, also known as TTS. So when you attend a concert and when you leave the arena, you might feel that you aren't hearing as well as when you entered or when you initially went to the concert. Sounds may be muffled, your ears might feel full, and you may also experience some ringing in your ears. So this is what is known as the temporary threshold shift. So the recovery time for this varies. It can take a few hours or last for a few days. The longer, the more intense the noise exposure, this will cause a longer lasting temporary threshold shift experience. And there are other factors that can also play a role in the experience. So this includes the person's age, sex, prior history of noise exposure, use of ototoxic medications, and so on. So these symptoms, including, the slight changes in hearing, the oral fullness, so the fact that your ears feel full, and the tinnitus, are indications that you have damaged your auditory system. So repeated episodes of temporary threshold shift could lead to permanent damage to your hearing. So after prolonged exposure to noise, there may be permanent damage, as I just explained, in the inner ear. So a permanent threshold shift results in permanent hearing loss. Okay. So it's highly recommended to have a hearing test to measure how severe the hearing loss is and whether treatment options such as hearing aids are needed. So below here is an example of permanent threshold shift in a group of weavers that were exposed to 102 dB of noise. Okay, so this is at a work environment. The different colored lines represent the number of years that the weavers have worked. And as you can see, the longer they've worked in the noisy environment, the more hearing loss they have. So the green line on top is less than 1 year. And the red line on the bottom are the very experienced weavers that have worked for 35 to 39 years. So when is it too loud? So here are some signs that your hearing is at risk. So when you're at an event, if you have to speak up or if you have to keep moving closer. So these are signs that it's too loud. After the event, if your speech sounds become muffled, you've likely damaged your auditory system. And also if your ears start to hurt, so ottalgia. And if you're experiencing ringing in the ears, so these are signs that what you've experienced was too loud for your ears. Other harmful effects of loud noise exposure include stress, anxiety, insomnia, even after when the noise exposure, even after when the noise stops. It can also lead to systemic effects such as high blood pressure, increased heart rate, and as a result of having difficulty hearing or tinnitus, individuals might become more isolated, leading to depression and social isolation. So not only does loud noise exposure cause difficulties and hearing impairments, this can also lead to other systemic troubles. Moving on to the second part of my presentation. So now that we learned a bit about noise exposure, what causes noise exposure and the different symptoms associated with it, let's talk about how we can prevent noise exposure. So noise-induced hearing loss is the only type of hearing loss that's completely preventable. So you can easily remove yourself from the noise or protect your ears from the noise. So if you understand the hazards of noise and how to protect, and how to practice good hearing health, you can very well protect your hearing. So here's how. So knowing which noises can cause damage, so how loud will the noise have to take to cause damage to our ears, protecting our ears when being involved in loud activities, so wearing earplugs or other protective devices such as ear muffs. If you can't reduce the noise or protect yourself from it, move away from it, okay? So if you're at a loud concert, you can take a step back from the speakers at the front and be alert to the hazardous noises in the environment. We can also protect the ears of young children who are too young to protect their own ears. So if you're outside and it's too loud, we can always provide earmuffs to our young children's. Education, so educate friends, families, colleagues, and allow them to be aware of the hazards of noise exposure, just like what I'm doing with this presentation. And lastly, get your hearing tested if you think you might have hearing loss, because there are treatment options such as hearing aids. In the next few slides, I'll be talking about different types of hearing protection devices, so earplugs and earmuffs. So the one way we can protect our hearing from loud noises is to wear hearing protection devices. And two main common types are earplugs and earmuffs, okay? And here's an example of an earmuff, and there are different variations to earplugs. We have the standard earplugs and different types of custom earplugs, musicians earplugs, and so on. So earplugs, I'm sure you all have seen these in one way or another, is a foam-like device that's inserted into an individual's ear canal to protect them from loud noise exposure. So these are mostly manufactured from soft plastic or PVC, so polyvinyl chloride foam. So these are the foam plugs, and polyurethane. So these are materials that make up these earplugs. They provide very good sound attenuation when fitted correctly. And that the types of earplug chosen will depend on the individual's need and the personal preference. There are something called custom earplugs. So custom earplugs can be made with the help of an audiologist and can be done at our San Francisco and Stockton campuses in the audiology clinic. The audiologist will take an impression of your ear, like so, and send it out for a company to make the earplug. Most of them are made from a silicone semi-flexible material that fits perfectly into individual ears. So these type of earplugs offer the most personalized sound attenuation and fit because the earplugs are molded for the exact shape of your ear. There are also different types of custom earplugs for different activities. This includes sleep, musicians earplugs for music, sports earplugs for things like hunting, shooting, and even swimming. So next we have musicians earplugs. So these are developed specifically for musicians and production individuals who are exposed to unsafe sound levels but require high fidelity sound. So unlike the muffled sounds of over-the-counter foam and the unfiltered earplugs, these musicians earplugs are made with music in mind. So it's perfect for concert goers, and it helps to deliver very balanced sound reduction with very little disruption of the frequency response. They also have this interchangeable removable filters from about 9 to 25 dB attenuation that allows individuals to adjust the level of attenuation to fit their needs. So the greater the attenuation value, the more sound it will block. And lastly, we have earmuffs. So earmuffs are these hard plastic cups that fit over and surround the individual ears and are sealed to the head by these cushion seals, okay? So there are some advantages to earmuffs. So they're designed to fit most people. There are various noise reduction ratings available. They're reusable, durable, and longer lasting than most earplugs, especially the non-custom foam ones. However, there are some disadvantages with workers with heavy beards or those who wear glasses. Those folks might find it difficult to get a good seal from the earmuffs. So the hair and the temples from the glasses will break the seal that the earmuff cushion makes around the ear, and therefore allowing some sounds to still get in the ear, even though you're wearing the earmuffs. When you purchase earplugs or earmuffs, you might notice on the package that there's a noise reduction rating, or the NRR. So this NRR value is a measure of the effectiveness of hearing protection device to reduce noise levels. So the higher value indicates greater noise reduction, and these values range up to approximately 30 dB, and especially when used correctly. Okay, so when used as directed is very important here, because if you're using the foam earplugs and you're not placing them deep enough, you won't get the noise reduction as expected on the packaging. So we have to make sure that although we have the tools to protect our hearing, we're using them correctly. So now I'm going to talk about some phone apps to measure sound level. Fortunately, you don't have to rely on your best judgment in order to know how loud your environment is. So thanks to modern technology, your smartphone can measure sound intensity to determine if your environment exposes you to harmful noises that might cause permanent or temporary noise-induced hearing loss. So there are apps for both the Android and Apple users. Here are some of the examples of the apps that are very well known. So you have Decibel X, SPL meter stands for sound pressure level. Also something called Too Noisy Pro, and last one is a sound level meter developed by NIOSH. So typically when you use one of these apps, you will survey the sound in your environment, and it will give you the intensity level of the sound of the environment. So here we see that's 85 dB. So to wrap up the presentation, I will talk about two common frequently asked questions. So the first one being, can attending concerts affect my hearing? So we know that average concerts range from 100 to 120 dB, depending on where you are standing. So the louder the sound, the shorter amount of time it takes for the noise-induced hearing loss to occur. In most cases, noise-induced hearing loss resulting from a single concert attendance is temporary and should go away within a few days. However, if you're attending concerts on a regular basis, the loud noises can cause permanent tinnitus as well as hearing loss. So hearing protection at loud concerts, the first thing we would recommend is to wear hearing protection. So wearing earplugs is the best way to protect your ears. If you attend concerts regularly, you might want to invest in custom earplugs. So these are the ones that musicians use, and they don't affect sound quality in any way. So try not to use things like napkins or tissues since they won't protect your ears from the very loud, intense sounds. Secondly, stay at a safe distance from the speakers, so at least 25 feet from the stage. And third, take breaks when from the area where the music is loudest. So the longer exposure to loud music, the greater the risk. So you might want to take a trip to areas where the music is quieter for your ears, and this will decrease the chance of permanent hearing damage. So the second common question that people have is, can headphones and earbud use affect hearing? So headphones don't have to be extremely loud to damage your ears. So even listening to headphones or AirPods, earbuds at a moderate volume can damage your hearing over time. And that's because your ears are not just damaged by the loudness of the noise, but also the length of exposure as well. So recently, use of headphones, earbuds has led to a major increase in the prevalence of noise-induced hearing loss, including in the adolescent young adult population. The WHO, the World Health Organization, estimates that 50% of individuals 12 to 35 years old are at risk of hearing loss due to prolonged and excessive exposure to loud music with headphones and earbuds and so on. So the key danger of headphones is the volume, okay? So the fact that they can produce very loud levels of sound very close to your ears. So this is dangerous in general because the loud noises are damaging to, again, the hair cells in the ears. So how can we avoid hearing damage from earphones and headphones? Turn down the volume from the devices. So limit the exposure, can protect your ears. Use of noise canceling headphones. So noise canceling headphones can block external sound and let the listener enjoy music at a lower volume without distractions. So this will prevent the listener from cranking up the volume. Using over-the-ear headphones instead of in-ear or earbud style models. So over-the-ear headphones can increase the distance between the eardrum and the speaker. Okay, so distance, as I mentioned earlier, is very important. And lastly, reducing the listening time. So there's a 60-60 rule. So don't listen at louder than 60% of maximum volume for any longer than 60 minutes at a time. So these are all very good ways that if you enjoy listening to music or listening to podcasts through your headphones or earbuds, these are some ways that you can avoid noise-induced hearing loss. So there are custom earplugs available at the UOP clinic in both the Stockton and the San Francisco offices. So the regular custom earplugs, shown here without any filters, are $250 a pair, and if you only want one, it'll be half the price. Musicians earplugs with filters, again, so these filters, you can change them depending on how much noise you want to reduce. So they're $300 a pair. And more recently, we also have these high-end hearing protection solution from Phonak. So there's options for music, hunting, shooting, motorsports, work, sleep, and comfort. And the price ranges depending on which option you choose, and ranging from $26 to $62 for a pair, and they look like this. Okay, so this is all I have for today. I'd now like to open it up to any questions that you might have. Please feel free to type them in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhang. Thank you for a very interesting and informative webinar. So I do have I see a question from Stephen, and he asked, can hearing protection devices be combined to increase NRR, such as earplugs combined with earmuffs?
Yes, so if you're using the foam earplugs, so for example, if you're doing any lawn mowing, woodworking, you can use earplugs. And if you feel like you're still hearing the loud noises, you can also put on the over the ear earmuffs. So that can be one solution. However, if you're outdoors, please be aware of the environment. We don't want to block off too much sound, and you might not be aware of things like ambulances or traffic noise and so on.
And a little bit to add about that is it is recommended if you want the most protection, I think to double it up. And if you want to try to calculate the NRR for two of them, it's not like you're going to add one NRR with another NRR. There is a calculation that you can look it up from OSHA. But what I usually tell my patient is just look at the more noise reduction device. So let's say if you have earmuff that's 25 decibel NRR and earplugs that is 30 decibel NRR, then you just add 5 decibel to the more NRR one. So then the double protection would provide you about 35 decibel. So that's just a simple calculation that you can use. All right. Next question from Mr. Jacobs is, do the Widex or other brand hearing aids protect us from loud sounds?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yes.
So hearing aids, there is noise reduction in the hearing aids that can protect you from loud sounds. But again, we also don't want to wear hearing aids in very loud environments, such as when we're taking the BART train. So those can be very loud. So I wouldn't recommend my patients to wear that because that can sometimes be too loud. However, do keep in mind that hearing aids, there's a maximum output. So even though it gets to a certain loud level, may not damage your hearing, but you might not feel comfortable with it. So with loud, if you're in a noisy environment and something like the BART train, you might want to remove your hearing aids.
Right. So hearing aids are not the goal of the hearing aids are not to use as a hearing protection at all. It does, like Dr. Jan said, have the maximum output, so it won't go louder than certain limit, but the sounds will leak through the domes or the mode that you have in your ear and still damage your hearing. So please do not use hearing aid as a hearing protection. All right. Are there any other questions? From Karen.
Yes, I have a question.
I have questions.
Yeah, the question is, you mentioned about chemotherapy, that it can cause a hearing loss. I have a concern because my wife has breast cancer. She's going to go through chemotherapy. So what is the percentage that people, that they may lose the hearing after the chemotherapy?
Thank you for that question. So that's depending on the dose, how long the person is on chemotherapy for, and there's a lot of individual variations to the degree of hearing loss after cancer treatment. This can be, things like, did the person have hearing loss prior to the chemotherapy treatment? Is the person taking other medications that can cause a combined or a synergistic effect? So there's no real one answer to that. So depending on this is all depending on individuals' susceptibility. However, the one good thing that we can do is if she's had a hearing test before the treatment, you can compare it to, you can compare hearing tests before the treatment and after the treatment to see how much hearing loss has occurred. But in terms of, there's no, if the person receives chemotherapy, they won't have X amount of hearing loss. That's different for every individual.
Okay, so in other words, there is evidence that chemotherapy can cause hearing loss.
Yes, and with chemotherapy, because she is more susceptible to having hearing loss. If she's around loud noises, it'll be beneficial to take extra precaution to protect hearing.
Oh, thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, is that Judith?
Yes. So
Hi.
sorry, I typed my question in the chat, but it's not going to everyone. So my question is, how loud is the average washer and dryer, and how long should you be exposed to that?
You're asking about the washer and dryer?
Yeah, at home.
I don't think those are too loud. I'm not sure what type of washer and dryer you have. The one thing you can do is to use to download the app on your phone, and then that will give you a good, an estimate of how loud your washer and dryer is. I'm not exactly sure because I've seen very loud ones, and sometimes when you put clothing in with buttons, that can knock on the side and that can cause very loud noises. So it's hard for me to say how loud those are. But I wouldn't, if it's an average dryer, I wouldn't say that it should be too loud.
Thank you.
Mhm. Dr. Gale, do you have anything to add to that about washers and dryers?
Yes, I think that's a good comment about if you're worried that it's too loud, you just download the app that Dr. Jang mentioned in the slide, and then just measure the how loud the noise is. And you look at the chart to see how loud it is and the duration of time that you're exposing to that noise, and see if it might cause a damage to your ear. Karen does have a question. Karen, do you want to just ask the question that you put on the chat? Karen? All right, I'm just gonna ask her question. She has two questions. First, does UOP offer any types of classes to train your ears to hear better? And number two, does UOP have cognitive behavioral therapy classes or tinnitus retraining therapy classes?
I can only say for the San Francisco campus, since I'm there, we currently do not have any tinnitus management therapy sessions, but I think we're looking into developing them in the future. Gail, I think you can speak for Stockton.
So Stockton, Dr. Stephanie Raoul used to offer tinnitus retraining therapy program, but she is no longer here. So it's on the same boat, trying to develop that program. But we usually refer patients out to like a tinnitus clinic, like at UCSF or UC Davis. They would have a more specialized clinic for tinnitus retraining therapy. In terms of the classes to help your ears hear better, I think that you probably refer to auditory training therapy, auditory rehabilitation classes. We also do not have those classes, but we do have a handout that I am happy to email you about different programs that you can download online or access online, and they have different programs that help you hear or train your ears and your brain to hear better in different listening situations, like in a background noise, like in competing conversation situations, to help your brain filter out the noise and focus on the speech a little bit better. We did also have that seminar on that topic that you can access online on our website as well. Okay, and yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Mrs. Sato or Karen, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned that chemicals and sound cause a hearing loss. What about radiation? Would that be a possibility for hearing loss?
So radiation, there has been some reports of head and neck radiation. So individuals having head and neck cancers, having radiations to that areas. That there are some evidences that it can cause hearing loss. I'm not aware of radiation to other parts of the body causing hearing loss.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments?
I had a few questions.
Yes, please.
I have a
Can you hear
question.
me?
We heard you.
I was just wondering if, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Are you
I
talking
was
to
wondering
me?
if, could you,
All right. If we cannot really hear you, whoever is talking, you can type in the chat box and I can repeat the question. Karen, did you have more question? You're on mute. Hold on. Go ahead and unmute, please.
I said, is there a hearing loss club in Stockton?
Yes. I'm not sure if there's one in Stockton, but if you look up HLAA, I think that's the abbreviation of the Hearing Loss Association of America. There are different chapters throughout Northern California.
Could you put that in writing on the chat
Yes.
so we could all write it down if we want?
Sure.
And how about, is there a mindfulness-based tinnitus?
Yes,
stress
there is. I'll put that in
reduction?
the chat as well, okay?
I mean, I've never heard of these before, so I don't think these things are well known in our area.
Right. It's mainly, we talked about that when you have, significant tinnitus and you need to refer you out to see mindfulness therapy or psychologist for cognitive behavioral therapy. But I will put that in the chat if you are interested.
Okay, I just think that more people need to be aware of it. I mean, a lot of people wear glasses, right? But there seems to be some kind of stigma about wearing hearing aids, although there shouldn't be.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
so many people wear hearing aids.
Definitely. So this is why we have these webinars, these educational webinars to educate the community about hearing loss and hearing aids and how common hearing loss actually is in the population. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more publicity because not that people are aware of it, in my own opinion. And I think when they're training doctors and nurses and teachers, they have to be cognizant of the fact that when they talk to a blackboard or a whiteboard, their voices go forward. They need to speak to the students instead. It's a retraining they need, because I know when I've taken classes, when teachers talk and you can't hear very well, and the same for mask wearing. We don't realize how much we lip read. And we need to be aware, and they put that plastic shield up in front, which makes it even worse. If you're wearing a mask behind the plastic shield, that's a double loss of being able to hear.
Yes, definitely. I think through the pandemic, we learned the importance of hearing, and also to be, for the medical professionals, doctors, nurses, to be aware of hearing loss in our population.
Right. And I don't think they are right now, because if you go to a doctor, they always want to seat you to the left or right or on a table while they're talking to their computer. And I've just come out when I've had to do that and say, how about if I sit next to you because I have a hearing loss? And then they're quite willing to do that. But you have to say something if you can't hear them. At least that's been the case for me.
Yes, thank you very much for that information, Karen. And are there any other questions? Dana, I think you raised this.
Yeah, I have a question. I play in several and sing in different music groups, and especially in an orchestra, it can be very loud. And if I wear earplugs or turn my hearing aids off, then I can't hear what the conductor's instructions are. And I'm wondering if anybody has any solution to that.
Have you tried to orient yourself in a way that you can hear the conductor, but also hear the music behind you?
Well, the music's all around me.
Oh, music's all around you. Okay. How about
Yeah.
using technology such as a remote microphone so the conductor can wear the remote microphone, deliver what he has to say directly to your hearing aids?
That's an interesting idea, but it's not very practical to ask somebody to do that, I don't think.
So I think this, I do have students with hearing loss, and they usually give me a clip that I wear on my shirt in the beginning of class, and everything I say will directly go into their ears, so they have a less of this listening fatigue.
But that still doesn't help when the sound's too loud.
Yes, I agree. That's still, that solves one of your problems, but the fact that the sound around you is too loud, hopefully your hearing aids have the noise reduction or the noise reduction technology that can help, so that you're not damaging your hearing. But that is pretty difficult, I would say, that you have to manage hearing the conductor and also worrying about the sounds around you.
Yeah. Just an interesting note. In some orchestras, when I was young, most of the orchestras, the sound was on my right because of where the cello sits at the edge of the stage. Cello players sit at the edge of the stage. And so most of the sound was to my right, or I've sat in front of or to the left of loud instruments like trombones and stuff. And now I have my left ear, which was away from, for many, many years, was away from the orchestra. My left ear is much better than my right ear.
Yeah, that's definitely something that can happen with long-term exposure to noises, where you have, one ear is better than the other because you have one ear that's constantly facing the noise. Karen mentioned mindfulness-based tinnitus stress reduction classes in Ollie. I think that is possible in the future. I was actually offered to give a presentation about hearing loss during the aging week. I think that's like October 3rd or something. So maybe in the future we can weave in something about tinnitus at that time.
Unless you have a hearing aid that has volume control, you can lower it when the music gets loud. When the music gets soft, you can raise the volume.
Music gets loud and soft all the time. That's not real practical. Going to shows, like going to a show like Hamilton, I found I had to take out my hearing aids and it was still too loud.
So Dana, during your practice, do you wear hearing aids or do you wear hearing protection?
Usually I wear hearing aids, but some pieces are much louder than others. And it's more of an issue then.
So if you wear hearing protections, the concern is you cannot hear the conductor, correct?
Well, yeah, right.
We might be able to talk a little bit more about it. Might be some device that kind of like a remote microphone that allows you to hear just the conductor, but then you also add the earplug, molded into the ear mold. So it's still gonna protect you against the loud music, but then but then you can pick up the sounds from the conductor directly. Something like that. But I can talk to you more about it at the clinic.
Okay.
Hi, I
Thank
have a
you.
suggestion. My name is Lily. I'm an audiologist in San Francisco, a school audiologist, and some of my students use what's called a Roger Focus FM receiver. So it would be students who they don't need amplification, but they do need to hear the teacher better. And so they do use some type of a microphone system where the teacher is wearing the microphone, but the student is wearing, it looks like a hearing aid, but it's just a receiver that they wear in the ear to pick up the teacher's voice, but it's not a hearing aid, so it's not amplifying sound. So maybe that might be something you can use in the case where you don't want amplification, but then you still want to hear
that's exactly like what I'm talking about, but then we can mold that too into like an ear mold to protect also against loud noise. Does that make sense?
Sounds awfully expensive.
Not necessary, but we'll talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions related to the seminar today?
Yeah, I would just had a question if a few things could be repeated.
Sure.
I was wondering about the apps that were mentioned for
Sure.
the to measure decibels.
Sure. Here's a list
were
of the
those?
apps. So do you see the screen?
Oh, yes.
Yes, so you can make note or take a picture or
Okay,
screenshot
thank you.
of the apps. I really like the last one. If you're an iPhone user, the last one, the NIOSH app is great.
SPL meter. I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, this is Marlon. Is there a possible that we can get a copy of that presentation and download it? And
You
as
will
well as
be
the
able, yes. So this is recorded, so you will be able to access it in our website, upacifichearing.com. In probably about a week from now, it should be on there.
okay, a week. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing, could you speak to any other the autotoxins?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on maybe some more of those a little
Yes.
bit? Or
So
what's
ototoxins.
known?
Yes, yes, I can. So ototoxic, depending on whether you're thinking about ototoxic medications. So these are drugs like chemotherapy drugs and also antibiotics, especially those that are administered via IV. So some individuals have very significant infections, end up in a hospital requiring IV antibiotics. So those can cause hearing loss. And also chemotherapy drugs, cisplatin, carboplatin. Those are the two common ones that can cause hearing loss. So when these drugs are taken and the individuals also exposed to noise, this combination, or what we call the synergistic effect, can exacerbate or worsen the noise-induced hearing loss. So aside from
question, if
yes,
just on speaking to that, like, so let's say those autotoxins put you more at a disadvantage, but if you're not exposed to hearing loss, would you still experience it?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
loud noises rather. If
Yes.
you weren't exposed to.
Yes, you would still have hearing loss from the ototoxic medications without noise exposure. So those ototoxic medications by itself can cause hearing loss.
What you had mentioned a few, like some heavy metals, lead and mercury. I was wondering if there were any others you could mention, because I work in industrial settings and in construction and manufacturing. If there are others you could bring up.
Sure. let me take a quick look here. So there's certain pesticides that can cause hearing loss. So heavy metals, I think the most commonly studied are the lead and mercury. Let me take a look here at my list. I do have a list of chemicals. Also the asphyxiants, so hydrogen cyanide, tobacco smoke, carbon monoxide, so mercury, germanium dioxide, organic tin compounds, and lead.
Okay, interesting.
And also solvents, so carbon disulfide, so, and all these toluene, p-xylene, a lot of these, I don't
What
even know how to
about like
pronounce the names.
acetone?
Hmm?
Maybe is acetone on the list, or methylethyl ketone, or like probably some of the tones?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think the one thing you can do is search the name of the chemical, you're interested in, and put hearing loss next to it, and then see if anything pops out from there.
Hmm.
I think that's one
Are you able
way
to?
to do. Hmm?
Okay. Were you able to post that list?
Yes, I
List you
can.
have,
Yes,
or-
I can send that via an email later on.
That would be great.
And I can also send some
Sure, thank you.
resources in that regard.
And in regards to all those
If you could,
chemicals
please,
that cause, in regards to those chemicals that you mentioned, the hearing loss, what percentage of the hearing loss that we're talking about? 5, 10, 15, 30, 50%?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so in regards to the amount of hearing loss per exposure to all these different things, these all depend on the individual. So this is individual health, individual susceptibility, the individual's genetic background. There's so much to how much hearing loss a person can get from something that's really hard to quantify. So even a person that's been exposed to the same noise, so you can have two people of the same age working in the same factory, and one person can get much more noise exposure than the other due to these extraneous factors. So it's very hard to give an exact 5%, 10% type of thing.
So if you're exposed to lead, carbon dioxide, mercury, and take an antibiotic, it makes the hearing loss even more.
Yes. So if you're, if you have a combination of things, this can exacerbate it. One thing that we can do is always get our hearing checked. If we're concerned about that, every 6 months or every time you feel like there's a change in hearing, come see an audiologist, and we can always make sure that, your auditory system and everything is going well.
But water contains lead, that's for sure. Thank you.
No problem.
I have one other question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it. It's kind of unrelated, but I was just wondering if you can make any references, because my hearing has been tested within normal range, within normal ranges. But I suffer from like severe tinnitus, which sometimes impedes my hearing due to an injury I sustained, a blunt force trauma to the right side of my head. And I had a TBI. But do you have any suggestions of like things I could look into for tinnitus management, or?
So the one good reference is the webinar from the one before mine a few months ago. I think there was a whole presentation on tinnitus. The one thing you can try is sound therapy. So turning on some white noise in the background, some music to try to suppress or alleviate the tinnitus, so it becomes natural, in the background environment. And also you can also seek, therapy like mindfulness or tinnitus retraining therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy within the Bay Area. You can also explore those options. But there's no one solution for tinnitus. I think different people have things that work for them. So it's best to try all those options, and to, and the webinar from the last the last webinar can give you a lot of information on the different things that, are out there that you can try.
Okay, thank you. Where would I find that webinar? Is that posted to the
Yes,
Pacific dot?
yes, Dr. Gale just posted this in the chat.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions related to the seminar today? Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hearing aids are expensive, right? Most of them, I mean, if you go pricing them, they range between $200 to up onto $7,000. Is that hearing organization lobbying insurance companies to have all insurances cover hearing aids? I mean, some people don't get them because they can't afford them.
Right. So I think right now, there are, you have to understand the insurance companies they're very powerful, and it's hard to kind of lobby against them. So there are a couple of things that's going on, I think, to help to make the hearing aids a little bit more affordable. Medicare, I think right now they're working on covering hearing aids, but I think
They don't cover them.
right now they don't, but there are some lobbyists that kind of try to help make Medicare cover hearing aids but it's probably going to be just for like severe hearing loss, severe to profound hearing loss.
I don't.
Okay. But it's not in effect yet. I'm just saying they're working on that. Like in California, there are some organizations that try to help to make insurance cover hearing aids for even kids, because insurance are not, they're not required to cover hearing aids for pediatric population, even in California. So we're working on that. I know the state organization is working on that.
Well, that's good, because, a lot of people would benefit to have hearing aids, but they just can't afford what they need.
So the over-counter hearing aids probably will be coming out in a year or two. And those are geared more for a mild to moderate hearing loss. And patients can buy more affordable hearing aids at the pharmacy store.
Okay. Like, I don't know how much they are in Europe, but I keep getting ads for Eargos.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you buy online. How trusting should people, and it's advertised in the newspaper on Sundays about this little hearing device that you just stick in your ear, and people can get help online to buy them. I mean, how are they going to know what their hearing loss is?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that you need to be mindful about buying hearing aids online or on the magazines is that that hearing aids are not going to be fit or programmed exactly to your hearing loss. They will just send them, pre-programmed, and you have to kind of program them yourself using your smartphone.
Right.
Because and then there's no hearing test or anything involved. So if there's any other medical concerns from the hearing, loss, then that might be undetected. So I think it's still recommended for you to get the hearing test at the clinic, at the reputable clinic that has audiologists, and choose your devices that are within your budget, and learn about different options about hearing aids.
Right. I know that technology changes so fast. Why would someone want to pay $7,000 for a pair of hearing aids that probably a new model will be coming out the next year.
Yeah. So different clinics have different models. So sometimes like the most expensive hearing aids can cost up to about six to 7,000, and it's just because they bundled the services with it for up to like 5 to 7 years. And that's
Right.
why it's not just, you're not just buying the hearing aids, you're buying the services.
Well, okay, like I know Oticon is top of the line, and isn't it about $7,000?
It depends
What
on
makes
which
them-
it depends on which Oticon model you choose, and then the clinics that you go to. But,
Okay, what kind of services are we talking about?
Services that associate with hearing aid costs would include things like hearing evaluation, troubleshooting, sending the hearing aids in for repair, repairing hearing aids in the office, ear mold, hearing aid ear molds, all the counseling and all that stuff.
Okay, how about, are there certain brands that are better for like going to a restaurant? I don't know about other people, but the noise level is terrible. And
Yes,
there are hearing aids that adjust to different surroundings without you having to use an app on your phone.
Yeah, the hearing aids are actually supposed to automatically switch to different environments that you're in. So if you go from like a quiet place to a noisy place, the hearing aids will switch, and the more expensive hearing aids might switch to or fine tune to a little bit better environment that you're in. But Karen, I think, do you live in Stockton?
Yes, I do.
All right. Are you a current patient of us?
I've been to you, but I actually got my hearing aids somewhere else because I shopped around.
Okay.
And I found that hearing aids really varied in price. No offense. I mean, UOP was wonderful. I had been given a pair of Oticon hearing aids that someone told me that they could not be fixed for my hearing loss. But guess what? There was a hearing audiologist who was able to fix those hearing aids and adjust them to my hearing loss. And I wore them for 2 to 3 years. And what a difference it made in my hearing. But to have someone tell me that hearing aids can't be reprogrammed is wrong. Because what about these homeless people? They go down to St. Mary's. Can they afford a $7,000 pair of Oticon hearing aids when they can't even afford housing? They will take the old hearing aids and fit people with those old ones. Like when someone dies and they wear hearing aids, what are you supposed to do with them?
Right. We do have a program where we can help adjust or program the hearing aids to other family members and stuff like that. But all right, it is about 12:30 now. I'm going to close the webinars, and I just want to thank you, Celia Jang, Dr. Jang, again for spending time for the seminar today. And I want to thank you everyone who joined us at this presentation. Again, in about a week, you can access the recording on the website that I gave you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
has been really
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
We learn a lot by having
Thank you
these. I
for the
appreciate
webinar
the
and the
classes.
resources. Thank you. They're very helpful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm not angry. I just feel like people don't know enough about what they can do for their ears.
No, I think that's great, Karen, that you brought all those concerns up. I think it's a great topic. All right, I'm just going to end the meeting today. All right.